I'm often asked what's the best way to carry out routine maintenance on a shrimp tank. So in this video, I thought I'd share with you what I do and how I do it. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard and I'm a fish and shrimp breeder based in the UK. So for me, the first step is always carrying out a partial water change. I tend to change on these smaller tanks around 50% of the water about once a week, give or take. In my experience, the easiest way to carry out a water change is to submerge a small piece of tubing into the water and drain it down into a bucket. Here you can see on this piece of tubing, I've actually fixed a filter intake sponge over the end of the tubing. In my experience, when you're changing water in a shrimp tank, there is a tendency for the shrimp to be curious, head towards the end of the tubing, and before you know it, they're in your bucket. This is also true of baby fish. If you've ever had to water change a tank with baby fish, it's amazing how often they end up getting sucked down the pipe and into your bucket. By fixing this small intake sponge over the end, I've solved all that problem. I don't have to worry now where the hose is in relation to the shrimp or the baby fish. So as mentioned, I'll typically change about 50% of the tank water, but I'm not too precious. I don't measure the 50% mark. I tend to drain it down to about the halfway point. In this particular tank, I'm running a hang-on back filter. So the natural point at which I drain it down to is the top of the filter intake sponge. If I drop too much below that, the filter will suck in air and then I'll have to go to the trouble of restarting the filter. This isn't such a problem if you're using sponge filters. One important point to mention here when you're draining down a tropical tank is do make sure you switch off the heater. You can see in the background there the heater isn't fully submerged anymore. You'd be amazed how many heaters I've broken over the years where I've drained down the tank and forgotten to unplug the heater first. Nightmare. Okay, so once we've drained out all of our water, the next job is to clean the glass panels of any algae. I don't fear algae. Algae isn't a bad thing in a shrimp tank. Algae is actually really positive. Algae helps process waste. But I don't want algae growing on the panels I want to look through. So here I only tend to clean the panels I wish to view the shrimp through. I don't clean the back panel. If the rocks had algae on, I wouldn't worry about cleaning those. I'm not trying to eradicate the algae, I'm just trying to make it easier for me to observe the shrimp, and that's certainly easier without having to look through a thick screen of algae. Now, as mentioned, on this particular tank, I'm running a hang-on back filter, and you can see there I've just removed the intake sponge. Hang-on back filters have a strainer over the end of their intake pipe, but that strainer is designed primarily to stop fish getting sucked in. It won't stop shrimp or baby shrimp from being sucked into the hang-on back filter where they will surely die. By placing the small intake sponge over the strainer, I make it so no shrimp can possibly get sucked up into that filter. To clean the intake sponge, I just squeezed it out a few times in the bucket of water I had drained out of the tank. So with the water drained out and everything clean, the next job is to start refilling the tank. In this case, I'm using the jug method. I've just filled my large bucket up with tap water. I've dechlorinated it. I've left it a couple of minutes for the dechlorinator to work. And now I'm just refilling it from a jug. What you can't see in this video is this tank sits about 6 feet in the air up on the top of my racking system. When I refill my shrimp tanks, I just use regular tap water. My tap water comes out at about 7.6 pH. And we have fairly hard water. There are a lot of dissolved minerals in our water. Neocaridina shrimp, like red cherry shrimp, they do need those minerals to allow them to grow properly and to help them when they molt. If you had very soft water out of the tap, you may wish to add some additional minerals, perhaps using crushed coral or wonder shell or something similar. If you weren't keeping red cherry shrimp, let's say you were keeping caridina shrimp, crystal red shrimp or something similar, then they prefer the soft water. They don't like the minerals in the same way. But for me, Neocaridina shrimp, my tap water is hard. It works absolutely perfect. I like to refill the tanks using the jug method. It means I can add the water slowly. I don't disturb the shrimp too much. I don't stir up the substrate too much. It's simply a case of putting it back, one jug at a time, and enjoying the process. water changing is something I've always quite enjoyed. One thing I should point out here is I do go to some effort to get the new water at roughly the same temperature as the water I've removed. This tank here only holds about 8 gallons of water, and if I were to put 4 gallons of freezing cold tap water back in, there is the chance I could shock the shrimp with a sudden water change. So I try and get the water I'm putting back in at roughly the same temperature. I don't worry about getting it exact. I just put my hand in the tank, put my hand in the fresh water, and try and level the two up more or less. The heater will quickly adjust the temperature and the shrimp will be absolutely fine. One thing you may notice after a water change is thousands and thousands of tiny bubbles forming on every surface, the glass, the java moss, the rocks. This is just gases being released from new water after the dechlorinator has been added. Within a couple of hours they typically all dispersed and the water is crystal clear. So that is essentially my shrimp tank maintenance routine. I give the glass a quick wipe, remove any splash marks and leave them to it. I typically do this about once a week, but if it goes 8 or 9 days, it doesn't tend to matter. If my schedule allows me to do it on day 6 instead of day 7, I certainly don't worry about it. Shrimp have a very small bioload. Leaving them a day or two longer is not going to cause any major issues. Now this tank you're looking at houses my gold line yellow Neocaridina shrimp, and they're part of my 100-day shrimp breeding challenge, where I see how many shrimp I can produce in just 100 days. If you haven't seen that series yet, I'll put a link on screen now. Otherwise, thanks for watching.